This right here is Sergei Bobrovsky, a man who would take home 2 Vezina trophies during his time in Columbus, where he would then sign a 7-year, $70 million contract with Florida. Except his game would see massive regression, leading to many people saying he has arguably the worst contract in the NHL. But during the playoffs, we see a different beast.
What a save! And now Nature's moving in. He digs out and stopped by Bobrovsky. And that's
63 saves.
Partially blocked by Montour. Out in front, Bobrovsky dives to his right with a robbery.
This right here is Mitch Marner, becoming the highest paid winger in NHL history. But considering his dominant regular seasons,
Brody alongside, stolen, Marner in front, what a goal!
his willingness to hit the gritty. I hope I never see this again in my life. But in the playoffs, Mitch Marner disappears. And this season more than ever, we have witnessed the difference between the regular season and playoff hockey. Throw out everything you see in the regular season. I don't care if you score 69 goals. I don't care if you had 100 points. If that doesn't translate to playoff hockey, it truly doesn't matter. If you can't learn from years of playoff experience and then elevate your game in the next run, you will not see success in the playoffs. Sorry, Leafs fans, if it seems like I'm doing a personal attack, but come on.
Brother, this guy stinks!
And it begs the question, why? We hear the sentiment that playoff hockey is different. But why? On the left side of this graphic, we have the average for regular season hits per game, where this year, we would see around 45 hits. And I say around because I would have to pay $20 to see the rest of this list, and if it's slightly more, it doesn't matter, because throughout the first round of this year's playoffs, we have seen on average 81 hits per game, so nearly double than that of the regular season. But okay, there's more physicality, what's the big deal? How could this translate to Mitch Marner's game, going from an elite first-line winger to being invisible in each game? This hitting stat speaks volume on how the game of hockey sees an exponential shift when it comes to the playoffs. For one, players finish every hit. You want to make that perfect outlet pass? Okay, but you're gonna have to pay for it.
Big hit, hammering down the wall was McNabb, buried Stankoven.
But more crucially, coaches completely adjust their team structure. For example, in the regular season, it is very common to see a 2-1-2 formation. So 2 forecheckers on the puck, 1 player floating around the neutral zone, and 2 defensemen in the back, as this team structure allows for more offensive opportunities. As some players will thrive in this system, as it increases the likelihood of a takeaway or at least a good puck battle. There's a higher chance where that team regains the puck after a dump in, which results in high danger scoring chances. On this play, both teams are running a 2-1-2 structure. After a puck battle in the neutral zone, the Leafs take possession. And because they have 2 forwards on the rush, and because Carolina is also playing in a 2-1-2, the Canes lose coverage.
Now Marner, he'll step around Natchez, he'll put a shot through and score!
And Mitch Marner scores a beautiful goal. However, yes, the system instills offense, but it has a big trade-off of allowing odd man rushes. If the F1 or F2 loses the puck battle, or maybe there's a turnover, there's a good chance of an odd man rush going back the other way. So this structure will inevitably lead to high-flying offense. On this next play, again, both Seattle and Toronto are playing a 2-1-2 system. The Seattle defenseman attempts a stretch pass, Toronto intercepts, and because Seattle was committed to a 2-1-2, the Leafs go on an odd man rush.
McDavid, here comes Mitch Marner in front, scores!
Where they make a beautiful passing play and score. However, this strategy does not work in the playoffs. Yes, teams will see success in the regular season, but because the 2-1-2 will inevitably create odd man rushes, we see teams playing a 1-2-2 coverage, as this system prioritizes defensive structure. Yes, the F1 may lose the puck battle, but there's now little to no chance of an odd man rush, which helps contain and eliminate great players from scoring off the rush, as the 1-2-2 coverage forces the opposition to revolve their game around the dump and chase, basically clogs up the neutral zone. Therefore, it leads to better defensive positioning, so when your team is ready for the opposing team to make a rush, it also leads to a big uptick in hits, as the 1-2-2 requires teams to be way more methodical, as it turns chaotic hockey into a game of chess. Therefore, if you're a player who can not only perform in the playoffs, but elevate your game to the next level, your team will not see results. It's that simple. If you have a coach who can't adjust a team's game plan on the fly, that team will run into a wall. And while researching the topic of who is the best playoff performer, I would find some mind-blowing stats. On this graphic, we have a fairly comprehensive list of the best players in the game. And Mitch Marner. Sorry Marner, I just can't forgive you for this. And we'll also include the careers of Gretzky and Mario Lemieux for perspective, as each spectrum represents point per game averages. All the way to the left, we have 0.5 points per game. In the regular season, this equates to 41 points in 82 games. All the way to the right, we have 2 points per game, which in the regular season would equal to 164 points. The gold dots represent a player's regular season point per game average over the last 3 years. And by no surprise, McDavid leads this list with an astounding 1.71 points per game. Well, from today's age, as Gretzky and Lemieux were truly on another stratosphere. And this next stat was shocking. The past couple years, Mitch Marner has been under fire due to his underwhelming, if not non-existent, playoff numbers. And well, his production would drop off by 0.32 when it comes to playoff hockey. In the regular season, he's averaged a 104-point pace. His playoff equivalent would be 78 points, which honestly is not that bad, but this point total comes nowhere near his $11 million price tag. Also, if the line turns red, it means we saw a decrease. If it goes green, we would see an increase. Because what's crazy is that if we unveil Connor McDavid's numbers, we get an even crazier perspective. Because even though McDavid has put up regular season numbers we didn't think were possible in today's game, this man crushes his regular season totals in the playoffs. He even surpasses Gretzky and Lemieux, who would actually see a point decrease in the playoffs. So does this mean that McDavid is the best playoff riser of all time? Maybe? Actually, no. Leon Draisaitl has had the greatest playoff increase in NHL history, as his production has increased by nearly 0.4 points per game. This is a crazy jump that even surpasses McDavid. On top of crushing every NHL legend, which to me at least also emphasizes how Gretzky and Lemieux had inflated stats due to the NHL having so many expansion teams during their eras. And don't get me wrong, they would still put up absurd point totals. I'm not trying to take away from their legendary careers, but the fact that their stats decreased against the top teams, and McDavid and Draisaitl's stats would increase against the top teams, in a time where there is far more parity and competition, truly speaks volume on just how special these players are. Surprisingly though, Kucherov and McKinnon have seen a pretty big decline in the playoffs. And don't get me wrong, they're Stanley Cup champions, but this really shows how their teams have had great depth, which by no means is a negative. Austin Matthews would also see a drop, which isn't that surprising. But what has shocked me the most is that David Pastrnak has had the worst progression out of everyone on this list, as he has seen nearly a 0.6 point per game decline. We've been hearing about Marner, Matthews, Elias Pettersson, but we don't hear about Pastrnak failing to perform in big games, as Pasta has gone from averaging 103 points in the regular season to being a 55-point player in the playoffs. However, Boston's depth has greatly compensated for his playoff woes. So what we gathered here is Draisaitl is the greatest playoff riser, and David Pastrnak, not Marner, is the greatest playoff faller. But here's the thing, we all know that depth is crucial for playoff runs. There will always be matchups, indoor games, where star players are going to get shut down and aren't going to win you every game. Therefore, depth scoring is what wins cups. And if we look back at past Stanley Cup winners, I would notice a significant trend. Every Stanley Cup winning roster has had at least one player who would significantly elevate their games in the playoffs. For Tampa, it was Palat.
A pass to the middle. Palat! Score!
For Colorado, it was Lehkonen.
Archery! Lehkonen has scored! And for the second straight year, he sent his team in overtime to the Stanley Cup final.
And for Vegas, it was Barbashev.
Capitalized. Here's a shot and a goal!
Think about the optics here. Arturi Lehkonen goes from a good player in the regular season to a star in the playoffs, where he makes a fraction of Mitch Marner while putting up the same stats. Having an X factor like this is the difference between a long cup run and seeing disappointment year after year, which again emphasizes the importance of smart roster construction. If we take a look at teams who have severely disappointed, none of them, not even one, have had a breakout depth scorer. Toronto during the Austin Matthews era has had none. You can even look at the Oilers. And Don't get me wrong, their depth has gotten much better over the past couple years, but they too have not had a single depth scorer who has elevated their game to the next level. With that being said, the Oilers have McDavid and Draisaitl, who are definitely a prime example to how stars can compensate. Even look at the Canucks. A guy like Pettersson has not shown up, but the Canucks are lucky that they have players like Dakota Joshua, Mr. Game 1, Justin Williams is Mr. Game 7, Joshua is the Wayne Gretzky of Game 1s. And based on these findings, you have to ask the question, does your team have an ace in their bottom 6? Because if not, your team might just be in trouble. And as always, thanks for watching.